My name's Emma, and when my mom told me, "You're strong, you'll figure it out," what she meant was, "We gave everything to your sister and nothing to you. Not the house, not the company, not even the watch I wound for my dad every Saturday night. And the worst part, they didn't even bother to lie. They just erased me. But I found something they thought they buried, and when I showed it to the room, their faces went pale. You thought I'd stay silent, Margaret, but I'm done being your shadow," I whispered, my heart pounding with defiance. "Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever felt like your own family decided you didn't count? Let me know where you're listening from. This one's for everyone who was left off the list but never forgotten." I don't know what I expected walking into the Carter estate that afternoon, but silence wasn't it. Not from the walls, which once echoed my father's laugh. Not from the people sitting around that polished mahogany table who couldn't meet my eyes. And certainly not from my mother, who stood like a statue at the head of the room, hands maybe neatly in front of her silk skirt, gaze steady, smile carved from stone. I hadn't been home in 4 years. Even then, it was only for a weekend, and I'd spent more time in hotel lobbies than I had in this house. But after Dad passed, Lila had called me. Not to ask how I was doing, no, never that. But to say, "You should come to the house. Mom's planning to go over the estate." You didn't even care enough to check on me, Lila had thought, the sting of her indifference sharp. Not a memorial, not a reading of the will by a lawyer, just a family gathering. The kind where everyone knows what's going to happen except you. The front door opened before I even knocked. Housekeeper. New one. I think she didn't recognize me, just gave me a polite smile and pointed toward the back sunroom. The moment I walked in, the air changed like a warm bath drawn too long ago, still but not inviting. Lila was already there, legs crossed, designer scarf tossed over one shoulder like a trophy ribbon. Her blonde highlights caught the midday sun just so, and her lips pulled into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Emma," she said, the name sweet as syrup. "You made it." As if you wanted me here, Lila, I thought, my jaw tightening at her false warmth. "I said I would," I replied, taking a seat at the end of the table. No name card, no greeting, just a plain cloth napkin left unfolded while the others had been pressed into neat little leaf shapes. I picked it up and folded it into a leaf myself. Muscle memory. Dad taught me how to do that at Christmas once, back when the table was filled with laughter instead of calculation. No one noticed. Margaret entered like a senator at a press conference, posture regal, expression unreadable. Her perfume hit the room before she did. Rose, musk, and something sharp underneath. She didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, rested her perfectly manicured hands on the back of her chair, and smiled. "Thank you all for coming," she began, as if we were guests, not her children. "There won't be a formal reading. Your father and I discussed everything before his passing. It was all quite simple." She turned to Lila. "The estate will go to you, darling. That includes the house, the farm property, and the company shares. Oh, and the river cabin. He always loved how you decorated it." "You're giving her everything, Margaret, like I never existed," I thought, my heart sinking with betrayal. There was a beat of silence. I blinked. Once. Twice. "And me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother's smile didn't falter. "You've always been the independent one, Emma, so capable. We didn't want to hold you back. Besides," she tilted her head, try own light, but final. "Don't you believe in earning your way? You're punishing me for being strong, aren't you?" I thought, my anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. And when I knew this wasn't an oversight. This was planned. They'd written me out. Lila gave a small nod like it was all perfectly reasonable, as if it made sense to give everything, every memory, every asset, every trace of our father's life to her. "You're complicit, Lila, and you don't even care," I thought, my gaze piercing. Her eyes said nothing more during the meeting. What was there to say? The others, distant cousins, a few close family friends, mingled afterward as if nothing had happened, as if a woman hadn't just been disinherited in front of them. I waited until most had left before I approached her. She was standing in front of the gilded hallway mirror, touching up her lipstick, still poised, still immaculate. "He said he wanted things fair," I said. She didn't turn to look at me, just pressed her lips together, blotting them gently on a tissue. "Fair doesn't mean equal, Emma," she said calmly. "You never intended to honor his wishes, did you? I asked, my voice low but sharp. Work harder. She left the tissue on the side table and walked away. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the red imprint she'd left behind. Back upstairs, in what used to be my room, now stripped of everything personal, the walls painted over, the bookshelf gone, I lay on the stiff guest mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something inside me had dried up. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out the napkin leaf I'd folded earlier. It was a bit crushed now, edges uneven. I clutched it tight in my hand. It didn't soothe me, but it reminded me that I was still here, still breathing. Their silence was supposed to erase me. Their decision was supposed to define me. But that night, as I lay alone in the house where I used to be someone's daughter, something in me, quiet, deep, and finally snapped. They erased me from the room, from the name, from the story, and I let them. 3 days later, the memorial at Oak Ridge Country Club felt more like a magazine shoot than a goodbye. The valet took my keys with a nod that barely concealed surprise. I guess a dusty blue SUV didn't fit the family image. I caught my reflection in the tall glass doors, black dress, simple heels, hair pinned back. I looked like I belonged, almost. Inside, the lobby was dressed in lilies and over-polished grief. A host greeted me with the kind of rehearsed sympathy you'd expect from someone trained to serve cocktails, and condolences in the same breath. "Are you with the family?" he asked, squinting at a clipboard. "I'm Emma," I said. He scanned the list. I watched his eyes. Pause, flick down. "Oh, right. You must be one of the guests from Savannah. This way." "You don't even know who I am," I thought, my heart heavy with their dismissal. I didn't correct him. I walked in. The room was softly lit. Her carpet thick enough to hush every footstep. A display of photos near the fireplace showed Dad's life like a montage from someone else's memory. Henry Carter shaking hands with senators, standing at the cabin with Lila, and Margaret cutting ribbons at company events. Not a single photo of the hospital, none from the last year, none with me. I moved toward the seating area, brushing past clusters of people who didn't quite step aside. "That her?" a woman whispered to another. "I didn't know Henry had a second daughter. She's not in the article. The article, I found it laid out on every table. Remembering Henry Carter, visionary, veteran, father. 2 pages, 3 paragraphs on Lila's childhood memories of sailing on Lake Hartwell. A full spread of pictures with captions. I flipped through it, slowly. I was nowhere in it. "You erased me from his legacy, Lila," I thought, my anger flaring at their betrayal. I sat alone. The velvet of the chair scratched against my skin, too stiff for comfort, too shallow to sink into. My eyes stung, but I kept them steady. I'd trained myself to smile through worse. And then Margaret appeared. She stood center stage, Lila beside her like a reflection in softer light. Someone rang a glass and the room fell into that reverent hush wealthy families expect when they speak. "We want to thank you all for being here." Margaret said Henry was a man who believed in legacy and in honoring those who carried it forward. She turned, lifted a small velvet box from the table and handed it to Lila. "Your father wanted you to have this." Gasps of admiration rippled through the room. Inside the box, the Rolex, black dial, stainless steel band. I knew that watch like my own skin. He'd let me wind it every Saturday, told me once, "When you learn to take care of the small gears, the big ones won't scare you." My body moved before my mind caught up. I stepped forward. Quiet, careful. That was his travel watch. Lila turned toward me, surprise flickering into irritation. "He said I should keep it," I added, voice low. Margaret didn't blink. "He changed his mind." "It's just a watch, Emma," Lila added, tilting her head. "You stole his memory, Lila, and called it yours," I said, my voice steady but burning. "Don't make it weird." I stood there a second longer, then nodded. "Of course." I turned back to my seat. My fingers shook. Later, when they announced the eulogy, I knew better than to expect fairness. Still, I wasn't prepared for the elegance of the eraser. He was there for every big moment, my graduation, my wedding, even the cabin remodel he helped us finish last spring. Laughter, applause. No mention of the months I sat by his hospital bed holding his hand while he forgot what day it was. No mention of the oxygen machine I learned to clean the medication alarms, the nights I watched him cry. You took credit for my care, Lila, and I'll never forgive you, I thought, my heart aching with her deception. When she finished, people stood, clapped, even as if she'd performed, not remembered. Margaret stepped forward, smiled, calm. Some daughters are born to carry the name, she said, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. Others were just passing through. Do dismiss me, Margaret, but I'm not invisible, I thought, my resolve hardening. My words cut slow and clean. I didn't argue, didn't flinch. I reached for my napkin and folded it again, this time without even thinking. The same shape, the same small ritual. I placed it gently on the plate, stood, and walked out through the quiet. No one stopped me. So, no one noticed the kind of silence that isn't just about noise. It's about what gets buried in your chest when no one else will carry it with you. I pulled into my apartment complex around dusk. My neighbors were out walking their dogs or pushing strollers, oblivious to the war still ringing in my ears. The moment I stepped inside, the warmth of familiarity should have brought comfort. Instead, I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and just stood there, still dressed in black, still clutching the brochure from the memorial like it owed me answers. I didn't sleep that night. At some point past 3:00 a.m., I sat on the floor of my bedroom, with my old brown notebook in my lap, the one I used during those months caring for Dad. I flipped through pages filled with scribbles, medication schedules, appointments, little quotes he'd mumbled when he was lucid. You always see the pattern first, Emma, he said once, circling a headline with his finger. Never let people confuse you with noise. That phrase wouldn't leave me alone. He'd changed his mind. That's what Mom had said about the watch, but he'd never mentioned any such change to me, not even once. And until the very last week when the stroke took his speech, his mind had been clear, sharp even. We'd had hard conversations, honest ones. I opened to a fresh page and wrote down what I remembered, what he said, what he didn't, dates, phrases where he kept certain documents. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about clarity. Because something didn't add up. You lied about his wishes, Margaret, and I'll prove it, I thought, my determination growing. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my email. There, buried under newsletters and job alerts, was a message from Ellen, our family's former assistant. She'd left the estate the year before after a quiet fallout with Mom. We hadn't spoken since. Her subject line simply read, "You should see this." The attachment was a digital proof of an article titled, "Legacy of Henry Carter." The layout was pristine, headlines in serif font, quotes from business leaders, and a photo near the center. Lila, Margaret, and Dad standing on the steps of the main house. The caption read, "The Carter family, Henry, Margaret, and their daughter, Lila." My throat tightened. I remembered that photo. I took it. I remembered how Dad had laughed that morning, telling Leela she looked like she was running for office. I'd adjusted the lighting, reminded them to stand closer, and now somehow I had been erased from it. Like I'd never held the camera, never stood 2 feet away from the family I thought I still belonged to. You stole my moment, Lila, and passed it off as yours, I thought, my anger flaring. I set the laptop aside. That was the moment something changed. I moved to the coat closet, pulling down the top storage box labeled Dad. It was full of random things. His veteran's flag, a few books I hadn't returned to the study, and one envelope with his handwriting on the front. My name. I sat on the carpet and opened it slowly. Inside, a folded letter and a stapled copy of a will. The letter was short but unmistakably him. "Emma, I don't trust that everyone will do what's fair when I'm gone. Keep this just in case. You know who I am. You know what I intended. Love. Gad." I opened the attached document dated 8 weeks before his passing. It wasn't handwritten. It was clean, typed, signed, witnessed, and it split everything equally between Margaret, Leela, and me. The house, the cabin, the company shares, all listed, each name typed clearly, including mine. I just sat there, holding it, staring at it like it might dissolve if I blinked. They had changed it. Someone had. You betrayed his trust, Margaret, but I have the proof, I thought, my heart racing with vindication. I knew better than to act right away. I didn't forward it to anyone, not yet. I didn't call a lawyer. What I did instead was quieter. I walked over to my printer, scanned a copy, and printed another for back. Then I turned back to my laptop and opened a private browser window. The Carter estate had been transitioned into a holding company weeks after Dad's death. I searched through public filings, board member changes, and saw the new trustee list. Margaret Lila, a name I didn't recognize, likely the family attorney. Not mine. I wasn't on anything, not even as a witness to the man I nursed until his final breath. That night, I placed the will into a secure envelope and hid it in the freezer under a bag of frozen peas. Not dramatic, just safe. Then I sat down with a fresh notebook page and wrote one line. If this is the truth, someone rewrote it after he couldn't speak. The next morning, I packed the envelope back into the freezer, still tucked under the frozen peas like a secret no one would think to look for. And then I made the call, not to a lawyer, not yet, to Robert Dawson, the Carter family's longtime estate attorney. Or so I thought. Mr. Dawson retired last year, the receptionist told me, tearful and oblivious. You'll be meeting with Mr. for Hartley. Hartley. That name hadn't come up before. I drove back to Savannah 3 days later, a thin file in my purse and my voice rehearsed a dozen times in the car. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to ask calmly, like a woman who didn't just find her father's real will sitting in a cardboard box next to old receipts and expired medication. No dark paneled walls, no heavy bookshelves, just sleek white desks and a glass wall that looked out over downtown. Everything smelled like new carpet and citrus air freshener. Hartley was young, early 40s, if that, trim beard, pressed gray suit. One of those men who probably went to law school for the networking, not the ethics. He smiled and extended a hand like we were old friends. Emma, he said, I've heard a lot about you. I sat. I'd like to understand how the will was processed. He folded his hands. Of course, everything was properly validated and witnessed. The final version was signed 3 weeks after Mr. Carter's stroke at the request of your mother. She represented you with your power of attorney. I blinked. My what? Your power of attorney, he repeated like I hadn't heard him the first time. Apparently signed a few years back. Your mother used it to stand in for you during the signing. She had full authority to speak on your behalf. I never signed that. You forged my consent, Margaret, and thought I'd never find out, I said, my voice steady but cold. Hartley paused, ever so slightly, and smiled again. Well, that's something we can look into, but the document was filed and everything appears in order. Do you have a copy? I'm sure we can get one to you, he said, already moving to end the meeting. Your mother has a great deal of experience handling these matters. You're covering for her, aren't you? I thought, my suspicions confirmed by his evasiveness. I didn't reply. I stood, shook his hand, left, and as I walked back to my car, one phrase echoed in my ears again and again. She represented you. No, she replaced me. The following Saturday, my cousin Amelia invited the family over for a casual backyard brunch. No drama, she promised in the text, but there was always drama when it came to Margaret's orbit. It just wore linen and pearls. I brought blueberry muffins, store-bought because I was too tired to fake it anymore. Everyone else had arrived early. The yard was already loud with clinking cutlery and laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. As I poured myself coffee, I caught a voice behind me, familiar, whispered. She was always the difficult one. You know how Margaret said, Aunt Clara. She didn't see me at first, but when I turned around, her face flushed pink. Emma! Oh, I didn't see you there, sweetheart. I kept my tone even. You were saying something about me. Clara gave a tight smile, fingers fiddling with her necklace. Oh, nothing. Your mother always said you were, well, a little headstrong. Unstable? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You're spreading her lies, Clara, I said, my voice low but pointed. She said you didn't want anything to do with the family, that you moved away to separate yourself. I just assumed I wasn't part of them anymore. I nodded slowly. I see. And I did, crystal clear. After the brunch, I sat on the back porch steps with my phone and pulled up the invitation Amelia had sent. Backyard brunch with the Carter women. The header said, Honoring Leela, our heart. Nowhere was my name, not even in the fine print. They hadn't just kept me out of the will, They had written me out of the narrative. The good daughter, the legacy keeper, the face of the family. It had always been Leela, they'd made sure of it. Even when I was the one sitting beside Dad at every doctor's appointment, washing out his medication cups, setting up oxygen trimmings, trimming his nails when the aides didn't show. But I wasn't in the photos or the speech or the brunch invites, just like I hadn't been in the room when the final will was signed because someone decided I didn't need to be. You erased me, Lila. But I'm not gone, I thought, my resolve turning to steel. I went home that afternoon and pulled out a fresh legal pad. On the first page, I drew 3 columns: date, event, omitted or included. Filling it in. Jan 15, Dad's stroke. I was at the hospital. Feb 1, supposed will signing, not informed. Feb 15, obituary printed, only Leela listed. Feb 20, memorial brunch, no mention of me. Then I flipped to the next page and wrote 1 sentence across the top. If they spent years editing me out, maybe it's time I show up with my own version. The light in my living room dimmed as the clouds gathered outside, but I didn't bother switching on the lamp. I sat in the same spot for what felt like hours, just staring at the yellow legal pad where I'd started outlining the pattern of my eraser. It wasn't just the will. It wasn't just the brunch or the headline or the invitation that called Lila the only daughter. It was something deeper, something colder. I was removed not out of oversight but by design. A gust of wind rattled the window pane. I got up, went to the bookshelf and pulled down the old faux leather folder I'd brought from Dad's house months ago, his medical documents. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Couldn't bear to look. But now I needed to. I flipped through it slowly, scanning familiar forms, emergency contacts, prescription lists, old insurance paperwork. Then there it was, a healthcare directive from 6 years ago, clearly signed in my father's looping script. Healthcare proxy Emma Carter. I exhaled. I remembered that day. We sat at the kitchen table, he'd told me. If anything happens, I want you to be the one. You listen, you don't panic. And then I flipped to the next page. The note in a different font, a line highlighted. Revoked via updated directive. Feb 5, 3 days after his stroke. I blinked hard. The doctor had said, "Your mother's instructions override your request." Unfortunately, at the time, I'd thought it was hospital policy, some administrative mix-up, a system that didn't care who sat by whose bedside. I had waited outside the ICU in a hard plastic chair for 3 straight days. They said no visitors. I brought coffee. I prayed. I tried to call. No one ever picked up. And now I knew why. It wasn't the hospital. It was her. She'd used that forged power of attorney to take my place again, this time at his deathbed. You stole my final moments with him, Margaret, I thought, my stomach turning with rage. My stomach turned. I placed the folder back in its sleeve and stepped outside for air. The next day, I found myself standing near a velvet rope, watching a crowd of press and influencers gather outside Lila's brand launch event. Her new company, a consulting firm for whole woman healing, was debuting in Savannah's historic district. Of course it was. I hadn't planned to come. I'd seen the invitation online, another announcement that only mentioned her. Founded by Leela Carter, daughter of legacy entrepreneur Henry Carter. There it was again. But what pulled me here wasn't her. It was curiosity. What image had they built now? How far would the lie stretch? The room was slick and polished. Fly lilies on mirrored tables, sparkling water being poured into crystal flutes, staff in matching neutral-toned blazers. Soft luxury was the look, and Lela dressed in all ivory was the centerpiece. A large screen lit up behind her, the Carter method, and under it a logo, a delicate leaf folded into the shape of an infinity symbol. I couldn't move. I remembered that sketch. I was 19. I'd drawn it on the back of a napkin on one of Dad's nights. I told him it meant healing without end. He smiled, folded the napkin, and tucked it into his desk drawer. Said, "That's the kind of thing people put on buildings." And now here it was. Projected 30 FT wide, used for a business I didn't even know existed. No credit, no name, not even a whisper. She'd taken my design, my meaning, my memory with him, all of it repackaged under her own name. You stole my soul, Leela, and called it your brand, I thought, my blood boiling with her audacity. I didn't stay for the speech. That night I packed a suitcase, I folded sweaters like it was any other trip until I reached the bottom drawer where the shoebox was. Inside, old photos, one of me and Dad by the river, my college graduation card he'd kept in his office. I placed the photo on the bed, sat down next to it, and whispered, "They won." I stared at the wall, numb. I had felt smaller than I had since this whole nightmare began. They've always won. I reached for the lamp to switch it off, and that's when I saw it. A slim white envelope wedged between two books on the nightstand, my name written on the front in Dad's handwriting, and my hand froze in midair. The envelope was wedged between two dog-eared books I hadn't touched in years, books Dad had given me back when he still thought I'd end up writing novels at Savannah State University. I pulled it out carefully, the paper already yellowing along the crease. My name was written on the front in his familiar slanted print. No dear, no flourish, just Emma. I sat down on the edge of the bed, hands trembling more than I wanted to admit. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded clean, corners aligned, no envelope lining, no legal jargon, just his words in blue ink. If you're reading this, I probably didn't get the chance to protect what's fair. I'm sorry, but I trust you'll know what to do. There was no anger in his tone, just quiet resignation. Beneath it, taped to the bottom with a piece of masking tape, was a small USB stick. I didn't breathe for a second. I plugged it into my laptop and the screen blinked to life. There were two folders, one labeled Will Original and the other Backup Docs and Passwords. I clicked through the first, scanned images of a notarized will, signed, dated, sealed. My name was there, clear as day, next to shares for Margaret and Lila, both thirds. Dad had known and he'd tried. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. It felt surreal. After everything, after being erased from photos, documents, conversations, there it was. Proof that he had seen me, considered me, loved me in a quiet, steady way they couldn't mimic no matter how many parties they hosted. "You believed in me, Dad, and I won't let them bury you," I whispered, my resolve unyielding. The second folder was filled with spreadsheet files, joint account access, login credentials for cloud storage, even scanned receipts, all last updated 3 months before his stroke. Breadcrumbs. He left them for me because somewhere deep down he knew someone would come for what wasn't theirs. I closed the laptop lid and stood still in the dark. The suitcase sat half open on the floor, half packed from earlier that night. I stepped over to it, zipped it shut, and shoved it back into the closet. If he trusted me to carry this, I won't walk away. Savannah was an hour's drive. I didn't plan on seeing her, but when I passed by the new coffee shop in downtown and saw the crowd gathered under gold signage, I parked. Lila was inside, of course, the center of attention, white wine in one hand, a bored smile smeared across her face. It was late. Most guests were on their third glass. The room buzzed with laughter and networking. I slipped in quiet corner near the bar and kept my eyes low. She didn't notice me at first, but then her gaze swept across the room and locked with mine. She smirked. "Well, look who decided to crawl out of Savannah," she said loud enough for her table to hear. "Still chasing Dad's ghost." I didn't respond. She stepped closer, unsteady in her heels, and tipped her glass my way. "You know, she always said I was the only one worthy. You were just useful, practical, She told me you'd never fight back." Then she leaned closer, breath wine, sweet and sour, and whispered, "She said you didn't have the guts. Ever." "You're wrong, Lila, and I'll prove it," I said, my voice calm but laced with fire. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just let my fingers graze the phone in my coat pocket. The recording app was already running. I walked out without another word. It was past midnight by the time I got back to my apartment. The street was quiet, the kind of hush that makes you think the city's holding its breath. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. I pulled out the USB, the printed will, the phone, and laid them all side by side. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even about what I was owed. It was about setting the record straight. Lila could have her wine launches, her leaf-branded infinity signs, her curated version of our family, but I had something better. The truth. And this time I wasn't handing it over. It was for correction. The next morning, I woke up with that sentence still echoing in my head. It had come to me the way clarity often does. Not like a roar, but a whisper that doesn't leave. The apartment was still dark. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours, but I didn't feel tired. I felt clean, focused, not angry, not anymore, just awake. An hour later, while I was sipping coffee by the window, a text buzzed through from an old classmate I hadn't heard from since high school. Saw your mom and sister in this new promo, thought of you. There was a link beneath it. No explanation, no smiley face. Clicked it. It was a video. Slick, overproduced, loaded with emotional piano music and warm-toned filters. A legacy piece celebrating the enduring vision of Henry Carter and his family's contribution to consulting and leadership. Image after image rolled across the screen. My father, in his younger years, standing beside Margaret. Leela, in polished suits, in photo after photo. The three of them at ribbon cuttings, at speaking events, in family portrait. Me? Nowhere. Not even in the group shot I remembered setting up myself. Then the scene shifted to a dramatization. An actress wearing glasses and a sweater strikingly similar to one I used to wear was shown gently helping an older man into a wheelchair. The caption read, "Lila's dedication to her father during his final months." I stared at the screen. They had taken my care, my time, my pain, and handed it to Lila like a crown. "You stole my sacrifice, Lila, and I'll make you pay," I thought, my blood boiling with righteous fury. I shut the laptop slowly, not out of shock, but to keep from slamming it. Later that day, another message came through, this time from a friend in Savannah who once helped me file paperwork for a charity years ago. She attached a screenshot. Look familiar? It was Leela's consulting manifesto, the vision statement behind her new foundation. Had shut it down after funding dried up and Dad got sick, but the words had been mine. Transformative equity through accessible care and ethical leadership. Now, those same words were printed under Lila's name, slapped across banners and pamphlets, hashtagged all over LinkedIn. No attribution, no mention, just theft. "You took my words, Lila, but I'll take back my voice," I vowed, my determination unshaken. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Again, this time I wasn't trembling. Opened the folder marked Dad Originals, pulled out the scanned will, opened the slideshow builder. This wasn't going to be some dramatic exposé, no tears, no speeches, just facts. Clear, chronological. I added a photo of the will, embedded the time-stamped email from the family assistant, a screenshot of the promotional video, a clip of Lila's drunken words from the coffee shop, audio scrubbed and captioned. I labeled the file Truth for Release. 4 days later, I got an email invitation from the Carter PR team. The subject line read, "Celebration of the Carter Legacy, RSV confirmed." There it was. One more glossy event. The estate would be packed, journalists, donors, industry figures, every kind of camera and microphone. Lila would be center stage again, no doubt. Margaret would play the grieving matriarch, poised and impenetrable. I clicked RSVP, confirmed attendance. Then I shut my laptop and leaned back in my chair. If they erased me from their story, I'll write myself back in on my own terms. They turned my silence into a weapon. I turned it into a scalpel. The valet barely looked at me as I stepped out of the rideshare car. I wasn't dressed like the others. No sleek black dress, no string of pearls, no one they thought I'd forgotten. The Carter estate shimmered under fairy lights. The marble courtyard filled with chattering guests, balancing champagne flutes and self-importance. I walked past familiar faces who blinked like they weren't sure if they should greet me or pretend I was the help. Inside, the main hall had been converted into an exhibition. Screens displayed looping montages of Henry Carter's legacy, his speeches, patents, newspaper clippings. Lila by his side in every frame. A wall-sized print read, "The vision lives through her, not me." I walked slowly to the center of the room where rows of white chairs faced a temporary stage. A large projection screen stood behind a podium. People were already seated, murmuring, flipping through glossy programs. I didn't see my name anywhere in them. I found a seat near the back, not hiding, just watching. From across the room, Margaret's mine for a split second. Her expression didn't change. She turned away like I was a piece of dust she'd forgotten to sweep up. "You can't ignore me forever, Margaret," I thought, my eyes locked on her retreating figure. Leela, radiant as always in white silk, clutched her wineglass tighter and said something into her fiancé's ear. The MC took the stage, a woman in pearls with a too-wide smile. We're here today to honor a man who didn't just build a company. He built a legacy, a family, a future. The first few slides of the presentation began. The usual spin, legacy, impact, community. I waited. I knew the cue. After 6 minutes, the MC glanced toward the tech table. We'd now like to open the floor to personal reflections if anyone wishes to share. I stood up, walked forward, and handed the USB drive to the AV tech beside the screen. He glanced at my name badge, hesitated. I didn't raise my voice, just said clearly, "Just play it." He plugged it in. For a moment, the screen went black. Then the title faded in. Slide 1. A photo of my father in the garden, smiling at the camera. I had taken it 3 years ago, yet the public archives credited it to Lila. Slide 2. A scanned copy of the will. 3 names clearly listed, my name included. Slide 3. An audit trail showing metadata changes. Lila's name bumped up, mine deleted, weeks after his stroke. Slide 4. A clip from the coffee shop. Lila, glass in hand, laughing, the caption beneath her as she said you wouldn't fight back, ever. You were wrong, Lila, and now everyone knows, I thought, my heart pounding with triumph. Murmurs started across the room. Slide 5. A voicemail. My father's voice, crackly but unmistakably him. If this reaches you, it means I couldn't fix it. I love you. I trust you. Don't let them tell you who you are. Silence. A silence so loud it made the chandeliers feel too still. When the video ended, no one moved. Lila stood, frozen near the back wall. Her wineglass was empty now, her face pale beneath the foundation. She didn't look at me. She just turned and walked out in a word. You can't escape the truth, Margaret, I thought, my gaze following her exit. For a second, the room held its breath. Then I heard it. A single clap from a woman in the second row. Then another and another. Not a standing ovation, not some triumphant crescendo, just a handful of people, older, quieter, who saw what was true and decided not to let it pass in silence. 2 men in suits left shortly after. Investors, I guessed. One reporter from the Savannah Morning News snapped a photo of the screen. Another whispered someone scribbling something into her notebook. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. I walked down the center aisle, past every stunned face, past the empty space where my family used to sit. I didn't need applause. I just needed the truth to finally speak louder than their silence. 3 weeks had passed. The headlines were still floating around the internet like pollen in fall. Heir exposes inheritance fraud. Philanthropy or fabrication, Carter family scandal casts shadow over foundation. They didn't use my name much, just younger daughter or estranged relative. But they didn't erase me either, not this time. Margaret hadn't spoken publicly since the legacy celebration. She'd retreated, canceled events, declined interviews. Even her signature pearls were absent from the society columns. Rumor had it she'd flown to France for rest. Lila had issued a statement. Cold, polished, rehearsed. In every family, tensions rise in moments of grief. I wish my sister well as she finds her path. Your lies are crumbling, Lila, and you can't hide anymore, I thought, a grim satisfaction settling in. That was it. Not an ounce of regret. But it didn't matter, the damage was done. The myth was cracked, and underneath it something closer to the truth was finally visible. I didn't go on a victory tour. Instead, I went home. In a small storefront off River Street in Savannah, I opened the doors to my new consulting firm. Carter & Daughters, Legacy with Integrity. The irony didn't escape me, but neither did the healing. There were no glass elevators, no mahogany desks, just a modest reception, a pot of coffee always warm, and a single picture on the wall. Me and my dad in the backyard garden. We were folding napkins into little leaves, both laughing. He had grass stains on his knees. That was the man I remembered. Not the figure on glossy banners, just Dad. A month into opening, I received a certified envelope. No return address at first glance, just typed letters and legal formatting. Inside, neatly clipped together, was a scanned copy of my father's original will, bearing 3 signatures, his, mine, and an attorney I hadn't recognized until now. Tucked beside it, a single handwritten note. Your father trusted you. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. It was signed by the former Carter family lawyer, the same one who'd gone conspicuously silent during the will revision saga. "You're too late, but I don't need your apologies. Maybe guilt finally did what truth couldn't." I placed the will beside the one he left in the envelope weeks ago. Not to compare, just to know. Now, I had both. Truth in duplicate. That Saturday, I drove out past the city line, away from traffic, deadlines, screens, and suspicion. The river wasn't crowded, just a few families with picnics, a couple walking their Labrador, 2 kids skipping stones. I parked at the same gravel lot Dad used to insist on. It's closer to the trail. He always said it wasn't. But he liked the silence before the walk. The path down to the water hadn't changed, a little more overgrown now, maybe, but still steady underfoot. I sat near the edge on an old bench and took a folded napkin from my coat pocket. It wasn't fancy, just the kind from a diner I'd stopped at that morning. But as I creased it carefully, shaping it into the soft memory of a leaf, it didn't feel small. It felt like closure. I placed it on the surface of the water and watched as the wind caught it. It floated gently, twisting a little, then moved forward. It didn't sink. It didn't fight. It just moved on. I didn't cry. Not for what they took. Not anymore. Because as I sat there, I realized there was something they could never touch. Not my father's voice, not his belief in me, not the way he folded his napkin with me on Saturday mornings when I was 10. Not the way he whispered, "I trust you," with eyes half closed in that hospital bed, even if no one else heard it. They had tried to bury it, but the truth had roots. I stood slowly, letting the breeze catch my hair, and looked out one last time before heading back up the trail. "He didn't just leave me a name," I said quietly, "to no one. He left me truth. I'm Emma Carter, and my truth will outlast their deception," I vowed, my heart soaring with peace. I didn't need a stage, or a foundation named after me, or a nameplate on an office door. Some stories don't end with forgiveness, but if you can still walk forward with your name intact, that's peace.